Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Please subscribe and like this video for more content.
I hope the meal is to your liking.
It looks wonderful, thank you.
Please enjoy.
Don't die, you. Please don't die. That day, I let out a trembling voice with hands covered in blood. A young deer with its hind leg caught in an iron trap was panting before me, and snowflakes were falling coldly. The moment I saw that scene, one corner of my chest collapsed. There was a very shocking reason why this situation had come about. And I ask you who are listening to this story now, please be sure to leave in the comments where you live, how old you are, and what you are doing while listening to this story. Each and every line from you is a great strength to me. It was late winter that year. In early February, when the snow had not yet melted, I was living alone in an isolated thatched cottage below the mountain. Chilbach, that was my name. In the 28 years I had lived, it was a name that had never once received blessing. My parents had passed away from plague when I was 10, I had no siblings, and I lived just enduring day by day without being able to marry. One room in a thatched cottage. That was my everything. The walls had gaps here and there so wind came whistling in, and the stove smoke did not vent properly so the room was always acrid. At night I heard the sound of rats running across the ceiling, and in the morning I heard only the creaking sound of the table legs. As for human voices, there was only my own talking to myself. That day too was a morning no different from usual. I woke before dawn and tightened my belt. I tried to light a fire in the stove, but the firewood had run out. I'll have to go out again. Muttering, I took up the old axe and went outside. The wind was cold, and the sky was ashen. I climbed the mountain path for quite a while. The snow beneath my feet piled up to my ankles, but I could not stop. Without firewood I could not cook rice. And if I could not cook rice I could not endure that day. It was when I had climbed about halfway up the mountain. I heard an unfamiliar sound. Keek, keek. It was a sharp, thinly trembling sound. It seemed like an animal's cry, and it also seemed like the sound of wind. I gripped the axe and carefully approached where the sound was coming from. And at the scene that unfolded before my eyes, my breath stopped. It was an iron trap. In a trap someone had set to catch mountain beasts. A young deer lay collapsed with its hind leg caught. The snowfield was entirely stained with red blood, and the deer was barely breathing. Its eyes were bright, but within them were full of fear and pain. My eyes and the deer's eyes met. Keek, the deer cried softly. It sounded like a plea to be saved. I stopped in that place. My head became complicated. If I saved this deer, there would be no way for me to live. In those times, one deer in the winter mountains meant life itself. The meat could feed me for several days, the hide could be sold, and the bones and antlers became medicine. If I let it go, I would have to endure day by day again in hunger and cold. But the moment I saw those eyes, my feet would not move. This one wants to live too, I muttered, and I knelt down. With trembling hands I grasped the iron trap. It was rusted and stiff, and the deer's flesh was deeply caught so it did not release easily. I gritted my teeth and applied force. Keek, the deer screamed. Without knowing, tears welled in my eyes. Bear it a little, just a little. Blood got on my hands, and my fingernails tore. Still I did not stop. Finally, the iron trap opened. The deer's leg was released. I gasped and stepped back. The deer could not stand up from that spot, and lay collapsed in the snow taking rough breaths. I stared blankly at that sight. Go now. But the deer did not go. After lying that way for a long while, it slowly raised its head. And it looked straight at my face. They were deep, clear eyes. Like human eyes, it seemed to be saying something. That was when it happened. The deer slowly lowered its head. Once, twice, 3 times. As if bowing, it nodded its head 3 times. Seeing that sight, I could not open my mouth. Only then did the deer rise to its feet. Limping on its injured leg, it slowly walked into the forest. Only red bloodstains remained in the snow, and I sat in that place for a long while. The wind blew, snow fell, and the sun was setting. That day I returned home empty-handed. Without firewood or meat. Sir, please open the door. That night, when thunder struck as if to tear the roof asunder, a woman's voice came from outside the door. In that moment, my entire body froze. In these deep mountains, in this place where not a soul passes by, a woman's voice at midnight. The wind and rain lashed fiercely. The gate shook, and the roof tiles rattled. Please open the door. The voice grew more desperate. It was a voice trembling from the cold and wet. I rose from my seat, but could not readily approach the door. My mind was in turmoil. To let a woman into a widower's home, at midnight? If the villagers found out, the gossip would be inevitable. No, the villagers were the least of my worries. If the authorities found out, there was no telling what might happen. They said men and women should not sit together after the age of 7. But from outside, the voice continued. Please, save me. I gritted my teeth. And I muttered, a human life comes first. With trembling hands, I lifted the latch. The moment I opened the door, wind and rain poured into the room. And there, standing in it, was a woman. White giagori, white skirt. Her hair was drenched with rain, plastered to her face, and her whole body was shaking. Her face was pale, her lips blue. Please, come in, I said hurriedly. The woman staggered across the threshold. I quickly closed the door. The room became quiet again, but the thunder did not cease. The woman collapsed where she stood. Thank you, truly, thank you, the woman said in a trembling voice. I stood there, not knowing what to do. Please, warm yourself by the fire first. That was all I could manage to say. I went to the hearth and put in some firewood. My hands were shaking. I tried to light the fire with flint and steel, but my hands would not move properly. After 2-3 attempts, a spark finally caught. The firewood ignited, and the room gradually brightened. A warm presence began to spread. The woman moved closer to the hearth and sat down. Water dripped steadily from her wet clothes. I'm sorry for imposing on you like this, the woman said, bowing her head. Not at all. In such weather, you would have been in grave danger outside. I replied awkwardly. A brief silence fell. Outside, only the sound of rain was loud. May I ask your name? I asked carefully. I am called Yunhua, the woman answered softly. Her voice was clear, but somehow tinged with sadness. I am called Chilbok, I said as well. Yunhua nodded. Mr. Chilbok, I am truly grateful. Please, no need for formalities. I am not so very old. An awkward laugh escaped me. Yunhua began warming herself by the fire. I quietly shifted to sit farther away. It seemed improper to be too close. How did you come to be in these deep mountains? I asked cautiously. Yunhua's face hardened. Well, there were circumstances difficult to explain. Yunhua trailed off. I did not press further. Everyone has matters difficult to speak of. That's all right. I won't ask. I nodded. Then, Yunhua reached up to brush back her wet hair. In that moment, something caught my eye. The inside of Yunhua's wrist. There was a red mark there. That wound, illuminated by the firelight, looked remarkably like what I had seen during the day. The wound on the deer's hind leg. It was the exact same shape as the mark from the iron trap. For a moment, I could not breathe. My heart began to pound wildly. Could it be? I muttered inside my mouth, but no sound came out. Yunhua, perhaps noticing I was looking at her, quickly withdrew her hand and covered her wrist with her sleeve. Are you all right? Are you injured? I asked in a trembling voice. No, I'm fine. Yunhua shook her head and answered. But those eyes, they were just as clear as the deer's eyes I had seen. Outside, the thunder still rumbled, and the rain continued to pour. It was the third day since Yunhua had stayed at my home. When I opened my eyes that morning, the table was set. On my table, which had held only thin gruel, there was hot soybean paste soup and vegetable dishes. I stood there, staring blankly at the sight. Please eat, before it gets cold, Yunhua said quietly. How did you? I didn't know what to say. There was a bit of radish and dried greens left in the garden. I made it with those. Yunhua smiled shyly. That smile was so warm that I felt one corner of my chest growing hot. Throughout the meal, my throat kept choking up. I didn't know how long it had been since I'd tasted warm soup. I didn't know how long it had been since I'd felt another person's presence at the table. How does it taste? Yunhua asked carefully. It's good. Really, it's good. That was all I could manage to say. That afternoon, Yunhua was mending my clothes. Torn jacket, worn-out pants, holed socks. These were things I had been wearing for years just as they were. Her needlework skill was extraordinary. Her hand movements were quick and precise. You don't need to do such things, I said, feeling sorry. I must repay your kindness. You saved my life, after all. Yunhua answered without looking up. At those words, my heart sank. The words, you saved my life. From that day on, I began watching Yunhua more closely. Cooking rice, doing laundry, tending the garden. Everything was natural, yet somehow different from a person. Her footsteps were barely audible, and her movements were smooth as flowing water. And sometimes, she would stand gazing at the distant mountains. About a week had passed. The garden had changed. The vegetables that had been dying in the winter cold came back to life, fresh and green. The wilted cabbage lifted its head again, and scallions sprouted from the parched earth. How can this be? I muttered. Yunhua approached beside me. I gave them some water and fertilizer. But to grow this fast. I couldn't finish my words. Yunhua only smiled without saying anything. I could sense that something secret was hidden in that smile. But then problems began to arise. The village's biggest gossip, Mrs. Kim, started wagging her tongue at the well. Did you hear? A woman moved into Chilbok's house. A woman? Where did she come from? Who knows? She appeared suddenly one day. I had gone to draw water from the well, and I heard those words. The widower must be bewitched, don't you think? What if it's a mountain beast transformed into human form? That's right. She appeared suddenly at midnight, they say. Oh my, how terrifying. A demon has entered our village. The voices grew louder, and the stories grew more exaggerated. I clenched my fists tight. On the way home, my steps were heavy. When I opened the gate and entered, Yunhua was hanging laundry in the yard. She looked so beautiful in the sunlight. Mr. Chilbok, you're back? Yunhua greeted me with a bright smile. I forced a smile, but the villagers' murmuring did not stop. Rather, it grew worse with each passing day. Chilbok is bewitched by a demon and has lost his mind. Disaster might come to our village. Shouldn't we report this to the authorities? I endured it. I endured it for fear that harm might come to Yunhua. But one day, on my way back from the market, I encountered Yunhua at the village entrance. Yunhua was returning after going out to buy things I had asked for. But several women had surrounded her. Where did you come from? Where is your family, and who are your parents? Why won't you answer? Are you hiding something? Sharp voices were pressing Yunhua. Yunhua kept her head down, unable to say anything. Her hands were trembling. The moment I saw that scene, I heard something snap inside my chest. Everything I had been holding back burst out at once. "Stop this!" I shouted. People startled and looked at me. "Yunhua has done nothing wrong," I said in a trembling voice. "Nothing wrong? A woman whose identity we don't even know." Mrs. Kim challenged. "What does identity matter? She's human. Being human is enough," I said firmly, and I took Yunhua's hand. That trembling hand, I grasped it tightly. "I will take responsibility. So please, stop tormenting her." The people fell silent. Still holding Yunhua's hand, I headed home. I heard murmuring behind us, but I didn't look back. Market day had come around again. I headed to the marketplace, holding in my arms a bolt of cloth that Yunhua had woven, staying up for several nights. It was beautiful cotton fabric. Her touch had been so careful that every thread was even and gleaming. "If I sell this, I can buy rice and oil too." My heart was pounding. It was hope I hadn't felt in so long. With Yunhua, it seemed I could live like this. Not starving, not freezing to death, just ordinary. The marketplace bustled with people. I spread out the cloth and called out to people. "Fine cotton cloth. Please, take a look." But people weren't looking at the cloth, they were looking at me. I heard murmuring. "Isn't that Chilbok? The one who took in a demon?" I bit my lip. Then, someone grabbed my arm. It was the herb woman. The oldest person in the village, a grandmother who knew all manner of plants and medicines. "Chilbok," the old woman spoke in a low voice. Her eyes held an unusual intensity. "Fortune must come quietly. When others notice, it becomes poison." Her words pierced my ears. "What do you mean? Don't draw too much attention. People's tongues are fearsome." The old woman said only that and turned away. I stood there, stunned. But it was already too late. From among the crowd, a man strode forward. It was Songgu, a distant relative of mine. A man notorious for his greed and terrible drinking habits. Well, if it isn't Chilbok," Songgu said mockingly. The smell of alcohol stung my nose. "Brother Songgu," I bowed my head in greeting. "Brother? Don't call me brother, you demon-harboring fool." Songgu sneered. "I heard about it. Some woman of unknown origin moved into your house? That's... Shut your mouth. What business does someone like you have taking in a woman?" Songgu grabbed me by the collar. People began to gather around. I couldn't breathe. "That woman, this cloth, all the rice you've saved, hand it all over." Songgu shouted. "What did you say?" I couldn't believe my ears. "What right does someone like you have to own anything? Hand it all over." Songgu raised his fist. "No, this is what we earned." I clutched the cloth tightly. "What? You little..." Songgu pulled out a club and struck me across the back. I collapsed to the ground. The cloth scattered across the dirt. "This cloth is mine. The rice is mine. And I'm taking the woman too." Songgu stomped on me with his foot. You can't." I rose to my feet, bleeding. Songgu swung the club again. Just then, voices came from across the marketplace. There's Chilbok." It was the villagers. Carrying torches, carrying pickaxes, they were swarming toward us. "We must catch the demon before disaster comes to our village." My entire body froze. This was something I hadn't anticipated. I could barely handle Songgu alone, and now the villagers too. "Chilbok, where is that woman? Bring her out," the people shouted. "No, Yunhua has done nothing wrong," I cried out, bleeding. "Nothing wrong? If you're not bewitched, then what? We cannot allow a demon into our village." The crowd moved closer. I backed away. That was when it happened. From behind the crowd, a quiet voice spoke. "I am not the demon." Everyone turned around. There stood Yunhua. White giagori, white skirt, hair flowing in the wind. The people held their breath. Yunhua walked slowly forward, and stood before the crowd. Her eyes were clear, yet resolute. The demon is not me, but the heart that takes pleasure in others' misfortune. Yunhua's voice rang out across the marketplace. The people could say nothing. The heart that turns away from the starving, tramples the fallen, and torments the weak, isn't that the true demon? Every word Yunhua spoke pierced the hearts of those gathered. Watching her, tears welled in my eyes. Yunhua stepped forward before the crowd. People held their breath as they watched her. I will tell you all the truth. Yunhua's voice did not tremble. It was clear and resolute. My heart sank. I am not human. At those words, the marketplace stirred. I knew it, a demon after all, someone shouted, but Yunhua did not waver. However, I am not a demon either. Yunhua rolled up the sleeve at her wrist. A red mark was revealed. I am the deer this man saved. People murmured among themselves. That deer, whose leg was caught in an iron trap and dying Mr. Chilbok saved me. In that moment, my legs lost all strength. I had known, but hearing it spoken aloud, I could hardly believe it. Even while starving himself, he saved me. Tears welled in Yunhua's eyes. To repay that kindness, I came in this form. That's a lie, Songgu shouted. How can a wild beast become human? Be quiet. The old herb woman stepped forward. Since ancient times, there have been many tales of grateful animals. Such things are possible. But grandmother, this. Shut your mouth, Songgu. The old woman said firmly. People only looked at each other. Yunhua looked at me. Her eyes held such sadness. Mr. Chilbok, thank you. Yunhua bowed deeply. No, Yunhua, please don't do that. I tried to rush forward. But Yunhua raised her hand to stop me. I must go now. Why? Why must you leave? I asked in a trembling voice. If I stay longer, I fear harm will come to you. Yunhua looked back at the villagers. I fear that people's suspicion and greed will bring greater misfortune. Don't say such things. I can protect you. I pleaded. You have already done more than enough. Yunhua shook her head. Now is the time for me to withdraw. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Remember this. Kindness comes full circle. Yunhua said finally. The goodness you have shown will surely return to you someday. Then she turned away. People made way for her. Yunhua walked slowly, past the marketplace, past the village entrance, onto the mountain path. I stood watching her retreating figure. Yunhua, I called out, but Yunhua did not look back. And so Yunhua departed. Until her white giagori disappeared among the trees, I stood in that place. People scattered one by one. No one spoke to me. I returned home empty-handed. The house was empty, yet traces of Yunhua remained everywhere. The neatly arranged room, mended clothes, the thriving garden. On the table lay a small note. Be happy, Mr. Chilbok. I held that note in my hand and wept for a long while. I felt left alone in the world. But after crying, one corner of my heart settled a little. Yunhua's words came back to me. Kindness comes full circle. Days passed, and I made a decision. I filled a basket with radishes and cabbage harvested from the garden. When night came, I quietly went down to the village. I left the basket at the door of a poor household. Without anyone knowing, quietly. And so spring passed and summer came. I continued this practice, sharing what I harvested, quietly leaving it where help was needed. At first, no one knew. But as time passed, people came to understand. It was Chilbok who did this. Word spread through the village. People began to feel ashamed. They realized how wrong their words and actions had been. One by one, they came to me. We're sorry, Chilbok. We were mistaken. I only nodded without saying anything. I had no desire to blame them. Everyone makes mistakes. And years passed. The villagers helped me. They helped with farm work, repaired my house, and brought firewood in winter. I was no longer alone. Before I knew it, I too had grown old. White hair increased on my head, and my back began to bend. But my heart remained warm. Because what Yunhua had left behind was filling my life. That winter, the first snow fell. I sat by the window and looked outside. Snow was piling softly on the mountain ridge. Then, in the distance, I saw a white shadow. It was a deer. It watched me for a long while, then slowly disappeared into the forest. I whispered quietly. What I saved that day wasn't just the deer. What I had saved was also myself. To help others. I now understood that this was ultimately the path to saving oneself. The snow continued to fall, and the world turned white. I sat by the window, watching that scene for a long while. My heart was filled with warm comfort. The warmth Yunhua had left behind still lived within me, never growing cold. And that was enough.